Hello and welcome to the training log for the week of March 20th, 2023. This week is the 12th week of my bulk and the unofficial end. I've gotten pretty far away from my original programming, which was rip and tear, and I've basically completely devolved to doing my own thing, which is about what I expect at this point, so I'm not really concerned. I worked a bit more on front squats, and I ended up just doing some singles at 405 on Monday because when I got to that point, I just realized I wasn't quite up to doing more. My legs weren't really there, neither were my torso. And then on Wednesday, I went back to 405, but I went for a few sets of reps. I think I did a set of 3 and then a set of 4. It's not terribly exciting. It's not my strongest sets ever, but it's pretty decent, and it's just kind of base building, hopefully working up to something a little bit heavier in the near future. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to realize that. It really depends on how soon I move to working on strongman events specifically, because that'll take over a lot of the specific work that I'll do in my programming. But seeing as that basically depends on when the weather decides to start cooperating and acting like spring, for instance, we just got over a foot of snow on March 20th, I think it was, so, go figure with Wisconsin. So this is my fallback. I'll keep working on this until it looks like it's going to be consistently warm enough to bring everything outside and start training in my driveway, at which point I'll probably focus more on doing yoke squats as one of my primary squatting movements and not the front squats. Moving on, we have bench, which is pretty much the only thing I'm still following my program for. This week went about as well as the last couple of weeks. I felt like all the reps were pretty solid, and I was mostly happy with the top sets. They weren't anything stellar, but they were pretty good. I did try benching on the standard pad for one day as opposed to the fat pad, just because I had it already installed from the goofy lifts last week, and it was worse. I expect it to be, but at the same time, I figure I might as well try it, because for all I know, my technique has changed enough to the point where the fat pad is hurting, but that was not the case, so I put the fat pad back on for my work on Wednesday and then on Friday. Friday was the bench specific day of the program, so I worked up to heavy singles and I got this pretty easy rep at 405. I wouldn't say it's the smoothest I've ever done 405, but it's pretty good considering I haven't been doing the kind of training that really peaks bench for me. And then I tried to chip my PR with 420, and yeah, this happened. I shouldn't have really tried the rep. I knew a second I unracked it that it wasn't going to go up, but in the moment sometimes you make a bad decision, and it's not really a big deal. As you can see, getting the bar down to your waist so you can pick it up is not really an issue even at PR weight, so this is why I'm not afraid to bench without safeties, because it's really not a big deal to bow that way. Moving on to the fun list, which I'm sure is probably what half you're watching for. I wanted to get back to another deficit deadlift, and I decided to go with 2 bars this time, which is a little bit more difficult than a trap bar, but a little bit easier than just a single bar or some of the weird variations. And because getting down and setting up straps at that height was kind of an issue, I tried to actually go for hook grip this time and go for just grabbing the bars barehanded. Didn't work great at first, but when I came back and played with my grip a little bit more, it ended up being just fine, and I was able to pull a total of 510 from 18 inches, which is better than I could do with the barbell, but a little bit worse than my trap bar. I will note that I still have something wrong with my left thumb from this. I don't know what I did to it while I was trying to hook grip, but whenever I push down on it, still it has some kind of like tingling, and it's a little bit red and swollen, so I don't know if that's just some burst blood vessels or nerve damage or what, but I was told hook grip would only feel like it's hurting your thumb, it wouldn't actually deal damage, so apparently that was a lie. I also took advantage of my new deep dish plates from LeMaster Barbell that I showed you last week. I wanted to do some actual traditional Reeves deadlifts instead of the handled versions I had been doing for a little bit. These basically just involve gripping the deep dish plate and using that as your handhold for the deadlift, and it's not as hard as pinching, say, like a flat plate like I have on the ends, but it's not quite as easy as the handles, and I believe a deep dish plate is what Reeves himself would have used, so it's a very historical lift. Finally, I decided to do a deadlift while standing on some of the railroad line that I had salvaged, which uses a grip implement. It's about 5.5 inches off the ground, and it's about 2.5 inches wide, so it makes a good balance beam to pull off if that's not going to collapse under the weight of the better part of 900 pounds worth of barbell and person. So this was a bit difficult. The hardest part was not locking out in my traditional style, because forcing the hips forward to give a hard lockout really forces you to shift your weight to the back of your feet, which those aren't on anything when you're standing on a 2.5 inch wide chunk of metal. So I had to go with a little bit softer lockout with a little bit more forward lean just to keep my center of gravity in the same place so it actually remain on the part that I can actually stand on. So I took us all the way up to 6 plate or 585, and I was pretty happy with that. It's a pretty big lift for such an awkward movement. Moving forward, I'll be transitioning into a cutting period, which will probably be 5 to 6 weeks. And I don't really go abruptly into it. I'll just slowly start finishing off all of the extra food that I have for bulking. And then once it's all gone, I'll just be left with the core diet, which is basically all I eat when I'm cutting. So my cutting time is usually just kind of spent with a few rough goals in mind, and then just really focusing on kind of whatever I feel like doing, and then just essentially the bare minimum to maintain muscle mass, which usually involves less sets and a lot more compounds than strict isolation. So there'll be a bit of a change in the kind of the format of these weekly updates once I get to that, because I won't have a structured program to lead things with. So we'll just kind of take it as it goes, and we'll see how they turn out. And that about wraps everything up. So I will see you guys next week.